Okay, well, welcome everyone to Keeping It Strong, Supporting a Healthy Immune System. I'm Kris Vaughan, and I am the owner and program director of Herbal Wisdom Institute. And I have been a certified clinical herbalist since 2009. I am also a director of an herbal product manufacturer and have been with them since 2010, and really developed a deep love for herbal medicine and natural medicine back in 2008 when my youngest daughter got sick, and we were able to resolve her issues using herbs. And that was really my first introduction to anything natural. And I was so blown away by how well it worked that I went to herbalism school and completely changed my whole way of thinking. So if this is your first introduction to anything natural, I'm excited that you chose this class to be on. If you already know natural things, I hope that you still learn something new in this class. So as we go through this information about the immune system, you know, this is like such a great time for people to really want to dig in to the jobs of our immune system and how do we really give our body the best support that we can? Because, you know, we are now 18 months into a really difficult time of caring for ourselves, but we're also coming into cold and flu time. And, you know, in some ways, a virus is a virus. I mean, yes, they all act differently, right? They do different things, but when we're looking at immune support, virus is a virus. So there are some very basic things that we all can benefit from. And so I want to go through that today. And my purpose here is to really show you how effective we can be doing some very practical things for our immune system. I'm going to be going through information about how viruses act in our body so that we have an understanding of that. And how they replicate. Because when we understand that piece of it, then all of the other practical things make a lot of sense. Okay, so we're going to do that. I'm not going to be addressing in the presentation anything that is going to be considered controversial. Okay, I'm not going to be telling you my opinion of whether you should or shouldn't do something. We're just going to talk about the facts about the body. And from there, you get to make choices on your own. I am a huge believer in our freedom of choice, whatever way that leads you. And so that's my goal today, is to just really arm you with a lot of information so that you can make choices without fear, and choices that are based on knowledge and skills. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. I do expect the information that I put together to take pretty much the whole time, but I might talk really fast to get through some of it. I could talk for hours. Like if you've been a student of mine, you know I can talk, right? But I really want to get through as much information as I can. And then I'm going to stay on as long as I need to in order to answer questions. Okay. And then just a reminder, you will all get this recording so that if you want to go back and reference anything that we've talked about, you absolutely will have that to do. Okay. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint screen and we are going to get started. Okay, let's see here. Okay, can you all see that? Keeping it strong, supporting a healthy immune system. Okay, now the other thing I want you to know is there's a chat function down at the bottom and you can type questions. I'd love it if you type questions in there. I'm probably not going to be looking at them while I'm presenting, but at the end, I'd love to be able to kind of scroll through that if you have particular questions and be able to answer them at that time. Okay, so if there's something you don't want to forget, go ahead and put it in that chat function, and we'll do our best to get to that. Okay. All right. So let's see here. There we go. Okay. So basic disclaimer here. Everything that I'm going to be talking about and presenting in this class is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as replacement for the guidance of your qualified healthcare practitioner. If you are looking to start dietary supplements that we discuss in this class or herbs, and you are also taking pharmaceutical medications, you always should consult with your healthcare provider before doing so. And then we're going to be talking about some specific products. So any statements that I might make about those products are not approved by the Food and Drug Administration, and they're not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent a disease. Also, when I'm talking about certain products, that's my opinion, and it's not endorsed by any of the companies that I might show you. Okay. All right. So it's important for us to understand first what the jobs of our immune system are. And, you know, we can go in my herbalism course, we go really deep into exactly how the immune system functions in terms of every single immune cell that is involved. We're not going to get that deep today, but there are three main jobs that your immune system is doing all the time, whether you realize that it's happening or not. And so the first thing that your immune system is doing is preventing any type of infection. So it's a protection mechanism from infection. And so there are a variety of different ways that your immune system inhibits infection from virus, from bacteria, from fungus, and from parasites. And these are things that we all come in contact with every day. Okay, you cannot get away from any of these things. So our immune system has to be armed and ready all the time to fight off any type of infection. And it does this really well and very effectively most of the time, as long as we are giving our body everything that it needs at a cellular level in order to function well. Now, I will tell you that it doesn't matter how healthy you are. There are going to be times where your immune system is lowered for a particular reason, and you're going to get something. You're going to catch a cold. The average individual catches at least 2 colds a year. Okay. And that's typically at change of season. Now we're coming into, like I had said earlier, cold and flu time that starts October-ish, November, and really goes through about April. Okay. So starting right now to really strengthen the body is great, because then we can go into that cold and flu time really armed with protection. Now, the second job that the immune system does is it cleanses the body. And so as these immune cells, or like our immune army, I like to say, is kind of cruising through the body and finding these virus or bacteria or fungus or whatever it is that doesn't belong there, it, you know, kind of encapsulates it, breaks it up, kills it off, and then has to remove all of that waste from the body. And then the third thing that the immune system does is it really protects us from cancers. And so you have trillions of cells throughout your body, and they're always replicating and renewing themselves. And, you know, just statistically, with that number of cells replicating all the time, you're going to have cells that don't replicate correctly. There's some kind of an error in their code. And so the immune system is looking for these cells that aren't quite right. And when that cell is not quite right, it's considered a cancerous cell. Now, we all have this going on all the time, but we don't call it cancer until enough of those cells are present to be detected, okay? But the reality is we always have these rogue cells that just don't divide properly, and the immune system takes care of it and gets rid of it, and we never knew that they were there. because that's how good the immune system is. It just really happens all on its own, and we don't even have to think about it. Now you have two different branches of your immune system. The first is what we call innate immunity. And this is immune processes that are present with us from the time of birth. Okay, this is our first line of defense in terms of protection against pathogens, those virus, bacteria, fungus, and parasites. And so this is things like your skin and the mucous membranes that are in your nose, in your sinuses, in your throat, in your digestive tract, in your genital urinary tract. All over the skin of your body, we have flora, which is a mixture of good bacteria, some bad bacteria, some yeast, all kinds of things. And all of that works together to protect us. So if you were to cut your arm, the flora that's naturally present on your skin goes to work to help prevent infection right away at the surface level. Okay, so that's innate immunity. We all have it, present at birth, pretty much stays the same throughout our entire life as long as we're really taking care of our skin and our mucous membranes. The next part of the immune system is what's called adaptive immunity. And adaptive immunity is really just that. It adapts and it learns as we go. Okay. And so this is what's considered our second line of defense. So once something does enter the body, you eat something or drink something or you breathe something in, now this adaptive immunity kicks in. And so this is really specific to whatever pathogen you've come in contact with, and it's very targeted. And this is where all of the cells in your immune system go to work, and they can recognize first that something doesn't belong there. They can contain it, and they can destroy it and get rid of it. Okay. Now, this process adapts and changes as we are exposed to things. And so each time you're exposed to a cold virus or a flu virus, your body learns that, understands it, and protects you when you are exposed to that same strain again. And chances are, at that point, you're immune to that strain. Now, you could get a flu every year, right? If that flu is a different strain, but you'll never get again the strain that you already had. Okay, so it has to mutate in order for you to get it again, because your body has learned that and is super smart and shares that information with other cells in the body. Now, we adapt our immune system by natural infection, so natural exposure. You go to the grocery store, somebody walks by you, they cough, they sneeze. You go home, a little bit later, you're not feeling too well, you have a cold. That's natural infection, natural exposure. We can also stimulate the adaptive immunity through vaccination. And so in vaccination, in traditional vaccination, you are exposed to a small amount of a particular bacteria or virus in order to stimulate that process in the immune system. So the body goes to work, figures out what is foreign, contains it, learns it, teaches the rest of the body. And so that's why you can get vaccinated for measles, for instance, and then you won't get measles. You could be exposed, but most of the time you won't get measles because your body has learned and adapted. Okay. And so this is the part of the immune system that we're really supporting when we talk about supporting a healthy immune system is this process of learning and adapting and being strong. So let's talk about viruses first of all. Like I said, we're never going to get away from viruses. Like estimates are that the earth contains 10 to the 31st power of viruses. Now to put that in perspective, that's a 10 with 31 zeros behind it. I don't even know how you would say that number, but it's a big number, right? And virus and bacteria make up most of what's in our world. So we can never eradicate, right? Like that's one of the words, eradicate a virus. It's not going to happen. Now, viruses can burn themselves out and become, kind of extinct on their own. Or we strengthen our immune systems. We stimulate our adaptive immunity so that we're not impacted by them. Now, viruses, unlike bacteria, they rely on our cells in order to replicate. So a bacteria has a cell wall. It's its own cell. And it divides into two cells all on its own, just like our regular cells do. Viruses don't do that. Viruses have to get into our cells and integrate with the DNA of our cells in order to replicate. So they act really different in that way. And I'll get into that again in a little bit. And so when they are doing this process, they're analyzing us just as much as our immune system is analyzing them. And they can find ways to adapt as well and become resistant. And so you've probably all heard about antibiotic resistant bacteria. Well, we also have antiviral resistant viruses, because these things are smart. If they weren't smart, we wouldn't have so many of them, and they wouldn't have been around as long as they have been around. Okay, now this I think is really important in understanding virus, especially in relation to vaccination. There are two different kinds of virus. There are viruses that are called DNA virus, and then we have RNA virus. Now, a DNA virus is very consistent. So what that means is when it enters our cells, it goes really to the nucleus of the cell. The nucleus is the center of the cell, and that's where cell division happens, right? When the cell separates. So a DNA virus inserts itself into the nucleus. So when that cell divides, it's consistent, it's reasonably accurate that it's going to replicate itself the same way every time. And so because a DNA virus replicates consistently and reliably, it's really easy to make an effective vaccine against those types of virus, because we know what they're going to do all the time. They don't change much, right? And so I've listed just a few viruses. This is not all of the DNA viruses, but these are just a few that you can reasonably get an effective vaccine for. And so it would be like HPV, human papilloma virus, herpes, simplex viruses, and shingles, smallpox, hepatitis B, Epstein-Barr virus. There are many more, okay? Now, when we look at an RNA virus, these are radically different in how they replicate, because these don't go into the nucleus. These viruses enter the cytoplasm of the cell, which is the liquid portion of the cell. And in that area, they have to blend with some proteins. And I'm going to show you a diagram in the next slide. They have to blend with some proteins, and they have to get packaged in a certain way. And then they get sent out of the cell to find other cells to infect. So in that packaging process, they're not always the same. And so that's where we get viral variants, okay, or different strains happening on a relatively continual basis. And so the flu does this all the time. And so you probably hear every year, the flu shot comes out, and then the CDC will say, oh, well, we realize it's only about 30% effective this year. And that's because they're having to guess about a year and a half ahead of time what strain of the flu we might be dealing with. And so they make their flu shot for particular strains. Well, now when flu season comes up, we could have some of those strains, but we also could have some radically different strains. And so if you get the shot, you could still get the flu because you're exposed to a strain that that shot is not effective for. Okay. And so this is the same with any RNA virus. We're going to run into this situation when we're looking at vaccination. And so some other, some RNA viruses would be rubella, hepatitis C, influenza, the common cold, and even COVID-19, which is what's most prevalent right now. So this is a great diagram I found on Khan Academy, and I just love how simple this is, right? And so I want to talk you through kind of the steps that a virus goes through in order to enter the cell and then replicate. So first, the number one at the top says attachment. And so the virus kind of floats around the body on what we call what we think of as like taxi cells. So it can't really move around on its own. It has to hitch a ride, right? Until it gets to the types of cells that that virus knows would be good for it to replicate in. And at that point, it's going to hop off of the taxi cell and attach to the cell that it wants to become a part of. Now, as this attaches to the cell, like if the cell knows this is a virus, it's not going to let it in, right? So this viral molecule cloaks itself in a coating. And I kind of think of it like a Harry Potter, if any of you watched Harry Potter, the invisibility cloak that he puts on. And so this virus puts on an invisibility cloak and tricks the cell into letting it in. And so that's the second part, entry into the cell. Now, once the virus is inside the cell, it throws off its invisibility cloak and shows its true colors. And now the strands of this virus begin to open up and come apart, okay? And this is when the natural viral proteins within the cell combine with the strands of that virus. And so these proteins are, you've heard a lot probably about mRNA, that's messenger RNA. These are natural viral proteins we have in our cells. And so when you're hearing that a particular shot is an mRNA shot, that's the part that they're trying to inhibit, is the mRNA proteins combining with the DNA strands of the viruses. When those two combine, it's called assembly. That's the fourth part. And so in assembly, they might combine and stay the same virus, or they might become a variant, you know, something different than that original one. And then they're released from the cell and they're off to infect a new cell wall. And so they hitch a ride, they put on the invisibility cloak, and they go through the process again. Okay, and so more and more cellular infection happens. And so this I thought was really, really interesting, because I know there's a lot of concern about the mRNA, but I just really wanted you to know that's a natural protein within our cells. Okay, so again, it doesn't have to be as scary as what we're hearing, right? Okay. Now I'm going to go through just like the most common viruses that we all get exposed to. And we're just going to talk a little bit about what happens in those particular viruses. And we all are exposed to this all the time. So first is the common cold. This is an RNA virus, very unreliable, right? The common cold changes all the time. They've tried for years to come up with a vaccine for the common cold, and they just can't, because it changes itself so often that it's just not effective. So the common cold is in the coronavirus family, so the same family of viruses that COVID-19 is in, also called rhino, or it's also in the rhinovirus family. When you're exposed to a cold, the incubation period is anywhere from 1 to 4 days after exposure. You're going to feel your first symptom. So this is, you know, you go to work and your coworker's got a cold, and, you know, 3 or 4 days later, now you have a cold, right? So it takes a little bit of time for that to hit you. And your symptoms are pretty short-lived. It's 3 to 7 days. Typically, we'll start with, soreness in the throat, or maybe your nose is sore or burning, or you're sneezing because there's irritation. You'll have some runny nose, so a lot of extra mucus being produced. Or maybe you just feel tired. You just don't feel like yourself. You just go, oh, I just don't feel well. And you can't necessarily put your finger on it. Some people will have a cough. It's usually very mild. And there's typically no fever with a cold, or if you do run a fever, it's going to be really mild. It's going to be a really low grade fever. Okay. Most of us, we get a cold and we just let it run its course. Moms will call me and they'll say, oh, my child has a cold. What do I do? And I'm like, well, really, you make sure they're drinking a lot of fluids, and you wrap them up in a nice blankie and you cuddle with them on the couch and you watch a cartoon, right? And you just kind of let it go unless it's really uncomfortable, right? And then we have lots of things herbally that we can do, or if you like over-the-counter things, it's really about symptom control at that point. But colds, really don't pose any severe risk to most people. So we just kind of let them go. Then we have flu, or what's called influenza. Again, this is another RNA virus. This one comes on really fast. So this is the kind of thing where you're at work, the person next to you is all red, flushed in the face. They can't stop sneezing or coughing, and within hours you're sick, right? This one doesn't wait days. This is within hours. Comes on really fast and really hard. I have a typo here. Symptoms last, and I left out the number of days. So sorry about that. You're talking, 3 to 5 days on a flu. And now when we talk about flu, we're mostly talking about headache, sore throat. There is a fever that comes along with flu. It's typically 100 degrees or higher. Headache, body ache, muscle pain, lots of congestion, lots of cough. Now, just for clarity, when we are vomiting a lot and we call it a stomach flu, that's not typically it's not typically an influenza. That's usually an intestinal virus of another sort, but we like to call that flu. But true flu is more body ache, fever, headache, cough, congestion. Okay. And so with this, we really want to support healthy fever. So fever does its best job between 100 and 103. And so when you feel like you're coming down with the flu and you start to get a fever, and maybe you take your temperature and it's 99, this is not the time to start popping ibuprofen, right? We do not want to slow that fever down. We need to heat the body up to a temperature that this virus does not like, okay? We got to burn it out. So as long as you're not extremely uncomfortable, and as long as that fever is staying 100 to 102, you're good, right? Like, let that go. I even would sometimes stimulate fever a little bit with like a really hot cup of mint tea while taking a really hot bath. And then you get out, you wrap up like a burrito and go to bed and sweat it out, right? That's a great way to really stimulate healthy fever to go through your symptoms a lot faster than what you would if you're always trying to drop that fever down. Now, if the fever hits 103, or regardless of what the temperature is, if you're extremely uncomfortable, or if you have a child and they're just very flushed, very whiny, then you do want to try to control that fever when it's uncomfortable like that, okay? And then we have COVID. And so this is also in the coronavirus family. The symptoms after exposure come on anywhere from 2 to 14 days. I'm tending to see most people, their symptoms come on within about 4 days, but it can be anywhere within that range. And these symptoms last, what they say 7 to 10 days, but it can be longer than that. Now, the contagious portion of it is typically done by the 10th day, but depending on a person's overall health to start with, symptoms can last quite a bit longer. There's definitely a lot of fatigue that hangs on for a long time. This virus is related to SARS, but it's more aggressive in infection rate than SARS, but less severe in its symptoms and fatality rate than SARS was. I was listening to, oh gosh, I always want to say he's a doctor. He was not a doctor. He was the chief scientist for Pfizer, former chief scientist. And he was talking about some of his colleagues that they did a study. They contacted patients who had had SARS 17 years ago, and they asked for blood samples. And then they introduced SARS to that sample, and right away the immune cells kicked in. Like 17 years later, it still remembers it, and it could fight off SARS. Then they introduced COVID to those same samples. Now, COVID being really 80% different than SARS, those immune cells kicked in and fought the COVID, which was really interesting because they're in the same family. Molecularly, they have a lot of similarities. So our immune system can be so adaptive that even if we're exposed to something within that same family, we have some immunity to it. I just thought that was fantastic and really, really interesting. So I don't know if they've published their paper yet, but he talked about that and I thought it was great. Now, original COVID was a lot of fatigue, headache, maybe there was a little bit of congestion, but not too much in the sinuses. Cough, shortness of breath was a big one. Loss of taste or smell. Now, the new variant that we're dealing with is more sinus related. So this is definitely showing up first with a lot of upper respiratory symptoms, a lot of mucus production and congestion in the sinuses. And so a lot of people are originally mistaking it for, say, a sinus infection. Okay. A little bit of loss of taste or smell, but not as much as with the original variant. There is typically a fever that lasts for 7 to 10 days. The fever doesn't tend to break. It's pretty consistent at 100 or higher. And, you know, COVID, the main concern is the damage that it can do to the lungs because it causes what they're calling COVID pneumonia, which is basically just pneumonia. But it's doing a lot of damage to the lung tissue. It's a very aggressive pneumonia, and it's more, along with building up fluid in the lungs, it's doing damage to the cilia that line the lung tissue. So cilia is like finger-like projections that help to move things through the tissue. The cilia is getting damaged and is getting flattened, and so we get like scar tissue. And so what we find is oxygen does not transfer through the lung tissue like it should, and that's why you have people that can then end up on a ventilator, okay? Because that oxygen transfer just can't happen. Now, some very specific risk factors for COVID. Most very healthy people will get COVID, and I'm going to tell you at some point, we will all have had COVID, like we all have had a common cold, right? It's just the nature of things. If you are a healthy individual, you pretty much have nothing to worry about. It's going to feel like a bad cold for 7 to 10 days, and then you're going to get better, right? Now, I have put these in their order of the most prevalent risk factors, okay? High blood pressure being the biggest one. Or any type of heart disease puts you at greater risk for severe symptoms from COVID that could lead to hospitalization. The third is diabetes. So even controlled diabetes, that blood sugar dysregulation is putting you at a big risk. People who are over the age of 60, although I'm kind of seeing that drop down into the 50s, especially if they have these other risk factors. COPD or any other chronic lung conditions. So, you know, if you're the type of person that every time you get sick, you get bronchitis, or every time you get sick, you get pneumonia, you're going to be at bigger risk for some respiratory distress if you get COVID. A BMI greater than 40. So that's, you know, when we're always told when we're overweight that how unhealthy it is, but this particular virus, BMI over 40 is a huge risk factor. And then anyone that's immune compromised. So if you have autoimmune conditions and you are taking any immune suppressant medications for those autoimmune conditions, you're going to be at greater risk of getting COVID. So really keeping this all in mind, if you are dealing with any of these things, like it is time to get some of these things under control, okay? So that your immune system has a better fighting chance when it comes to this particular virus. Here's a few statistics. I love statistics, right? Because now when we really break these down, we get to see what's really going on. So I put this together as of August 27th. That was, you know, a few days ago. But current CDC data as of that date showed a 99.98% recovery rate. Now, that doesn't mean that all those people didn't have to go to the hospital, right? That's not what that means. Some of those did, but they were able to recover and go home. As of August 27th, the mortality rate, the death rate was 0.016. That's way lower than what was being reported even 6 months ago. At that point, it was 0.3%. And so I put the numbers here of total cases as well as deaths, and I put the link to the page where you can find continual updates on the CDC website for case rates, death rates, hospitalization rates, all of that. The next one is current CDC data, again, as of August 27th, showed that 95% of the people who died had at least one additional comorbidity. So what that means is they had high blood pressure or diabetes or COPD or any one of those risk factors that I mentioned, right? As well as some others, but they had at least one other thing going on that caused that to be worse for them, right? Only about 5% of those who died from this disease had COVID only, okay? So when we look at that kind of information, I feel like I look at this and I'm not as afraid, right? Because I go 99.98% gets to recover. That's fantastic, right? And if I'm taking care of my health and I'm getting my blood pressure under control and I'm getting my weight under control and I'm getting my diabetes under control or any of those things, I have a better chance of staying well. Or if I do get it, then I'm going to recover easier than if I didn't take care of any of that. So links there for you if you want to go and always check that information as it gets updated. Okay, now, how do we support a healthy immune system? There's a few ways that we need to come at this. And the very first thing is lifestyle. So are you managing your stress well? That's a huge one. Stress depletes the immune system so much. Are you getting a good amount of sleep? Are you eating good, healthy foods? When we are looking at diet, it's super important. I'm going to go through that in another slide, but these are the 4 things that we want to pay attention to when supporting a healthy immune system. So we have to look at lifestyle, how we're living, how we're functioning in the world. We need to look at our nutrition. What are we feeding the cells of our body? And then we look at dietary supplementation for those areas of our diet that might be lacking, or for things that we just can't get from diet in an effective way. And then we look at herbal therapeutics to be really specific and targeted for viral protection. Okay, so we're going to go through all of those things. So first, lifestyle, and you know, you hear it all the time, wash your hands, right? Super, super important. Just wash your hands. You go somewhere, you touch something, wash your hands. I'm not a fan of gloves. I think that they spread more disease if you're wearing gloves all through a store and you're touching every single thing with your gloves, and then you go get in your car and now you're touching all over your car. Touch the things you need to touch. Go and wash your hands. Way more effective than throwing gloves on all the time. Okay. We should be washing our hands anyway. It's just proper hygiene. Wash your hands after you go to the bathroom. Wash your hands after you touch things. If somebody sneezes on you, wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Right. Proper rest. We've got to find ways to get good, proper sleep. Right. Sleep is where our body recovers from things. And so if we're not sleeping, then the body cannot fully recover. And I've talked to a lot of people who have had a variety of illnesses, including COVID, and the ones that get good sleep during that time get over their symptoms much faster than people who have a really hard time finding that sleep. Okay. Exercise and movement. I like the word movement more than exercise. The word exercise makes me go, ugh, right? But movement feels better, right? I'm just going to move my body however it feels good. And so maybe you go dancing, or maybe you like to go hiking, or, you know, make it fun. If exercise isn't fun, if movement is not fun, you're not going to do it, right? But get your body moving at least 3 times a week, right? It doesn't have to be an hour and a half every day. At least 3 times a week. Get out and move, do something. Or if you want to do something every day, 10, 15 minutes. Easy movement, go garden, do whatever makes you happy, whatever feeds your soul, right? Hydration is key. We have got to drink water. Too many people don't drink water, and then they wonder why they don't feel well. When we're depleting our cells of hydration, the cells can't function properly in order to stop viral replication. And then we have to balance stress. When we're under a lot of stress, those stress hormones deplete our immune system function. And so, you know, is that managing relationships differently? Is that that you need to make a change in how you work? Or, it could be, there's so many things that cause stress. I can't even think of them all. But is that yoga? You know, does yoga help you? Does meditation help you? Do you have to make different choices? Right? And so really put an emphasis on stress balance at this point in our lives. You know, I think so many of us have realized we don't really want things to go back to normal because it was super stressful, right? And so we have a choice to live a different way now, and that's super exciting. Now, when it comes to nutrition, we really need to focus on whole foods, really good quality protein, healthy fat in the diet. The biggest lie we were ever told was that we shouldn't eat fat. That was back in the 80s, right? Super bad for our brain health and the health of our cells. Our cells need fat. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. If that makes up the bulk of your diet, you are doing awesome, right? We also want to reduce fast food intake, or what is referred to as edible food-like substances, because they're really void of actual nutrients, but they fill our belly, right? But our cells aren't really getting anything from that. So as much as you can get whole foods into your diet, the better off that you are. Also reducing your sugar intake. Sugar depletes the immune system. So wherever you can start to cut that back is really great. Now, when we're looking at viruses specifically, they tend to energetically act in the body like they're cold. And so that's why we need to warm the body, right? Like when I mentioned fever, we want to heat the body up. And so when you're dealing with a virus like COVID, we want lots of warm, cooked foods, no raw foods, nothing that is super cold. You want soups and stews and hot tea. And you want those types of foods that naturally warm the body. So think about when you go out and you eat something spicy and you start sweating and maybe your nose runs a little bit, right? We want that. We want that body being stimulated. We want that heat in the digestive system. And so you look at things like garlic and ginger and turmeric and cayenne peppers and jalapenos, anything that's going to warm you up and get things moving. Okay. And so think about that if you do start to feel unwell, that you want things that are warm and well cooked. Okay. Now, when we know that our diet is not enough, we have to go into dietary supplementation. Viral exposure and fighting infection requires more nutrients, vitamins, and minerals than the average diet contains. And so supplementing with vitamins, minerals, and herbs even provides the additional immune system support that we need. And so now I'm going to go through like my top things that I think we all should be taking every day. How do you take it as a daily preventative? And what do you do with it if you do start to feel unwell? So the first is vitamin C. This is a water-soluble vitamin. You've probably all heard that, you know, your body only uses a certain amount of vitamin C and then you'll pee out the rest, right? And that's true because it's water-soluble. So I always recommend 1,500 milligrams a day of vitamin C for prevention. We all should be taking 1,500 milligrams a day. Now, if you take that all at once, most of the time, your body will only use about 1,000 of that and it'll get rid of the rest. And you'll see that in your urine, right? You'll see it change color. And during times of infection, we need more than that. We need 1,500 milligrams 3 times a day. So I have 2 on the screen here that I really like. The first one is by Empirical Labs. It's a liposomal vitamin C. Again, I don't have any tie to these particular companies, and this is not coming from them. This is totally my opinion on these things. What I like about the liposomal vitamin C is each molecule of vitamin C is wrapped in a lipid layer. So that's a fat layer. So now your body absorbs that like a fat soluble vitamin, and we can use it all rather than urinating out the excess. Okay, so I love that one. Now, a lot of people tell me that taking vitamin C hurts their stomach, and it can, especially if you have a sensitive stomach. So the other one on the screen by Integrative Therapeutics is a buffered vitamin C. And so that doesn't tend to irritate the stomach like just traditional vitamin C does. So I like these 2 as my top ones, but in reality, like if you got to take vitamin C gummies, take vitamin C gummies. I don't care, just get your vitamin C in you, right? It's so important for prohibiting viral and bacterial replication. So the vitamin C works on the cells as well as action specifically in bacteria so that they cannot replicate. So we stop that replication process. And so you'll hear about high dose vitamin C therapy by IV or people just taking a lot of vitamin C, and it really is effective. So number 1 thing you need to do is take vitamin C. Next is vitamin D. The minimum daily requirement of vitamin D for an average, normal, healthy individual is 3,000 international units daily. So the one I have on the screen is pure encapsulations. Each capsule is 1,000. So as a minimum daily requirement, you would take 3 capsules. So 3,000 international units. Now, if you know that you are deficient, and you should have your blood levels for vitamin D tested before you take anything higher than 3,000 international units to see where you're at. But if you are deficient, then those amounts can go up depending on how severely deficient you are, okay? Now, during infection, you can safely take between 5,000 to 10,000 international units a day during that, say, 7 to 10 day period, okay? But the reality is if we're taking the right amount of vitamin D all throughout the year, chances are you might be able to avoid these viruses. It's really interesting how we have a cold and flu season that starts October, November and goes through March to April. Those are the times throughout our entire country and world, really, that we don't have access to vitamin D from the sun, right? It's wintertime. We're not outside in the sun exposing 80% of our skin to the sun, because that's what you have to do. Expose 80% of your skin for 20 minutes or more. So it's not surprising that cold and flu pops up at the times where vitamin D is the lowest. We don't have the access to it. So I tend to look at vitamin D as your very best flu shot, right? Get your levels tested, know what your supplementation you need, what amount, and take your vitamin D every day. It supports both your innate immunity and your adaptive immunity processes that we talked about at the beginning. Third is zinc, 30 milligrams daily of zinc. During infection, you can take that twice a day. Zinc is found in all of the cells of our body, and its purpose is to strengthen the cell wall. So when we strengthen that wall, it's more difficult for a virus to attach to the cell and enter the cell, okay? And so we can stop viral replication by preventing that entry into the cell in the first place. So zinc every day, 30 milligrams. During infection, you can take that twice a day. And zinc also comes in lozenges or gummies, you know, if you don't want to take a capsule. Okay, now we're going to get into some specific herbs. And I'm running out of time. I got so much to talk about. Okay, so elderberry. I love, love, love elderberry. This is probably our most studied herb in terms of viruses, specifically flu. But I apply this to all viruses. Now, when they studied this for flu, they began to call this our top anti-flu herb because it did have the most action in preventing viral replication, but also shortening the life of the flu pretty much by half. So that's fantastic. Its actions are that it is antimicrobial. So it has action against bacteria and virus. It acts as an expectorant, so helping to thin some mucus so that when we do cough, we can get that up and out. And it can be antitussive, so it can calm a really spastic, irritated cough. We also call this diaphoretic, and what diaphoretic means is that it supports and stimulates healthy fever. So earlier I mentioned like taking a hot cup of mint tea or drinking that while you're taking a hot bath and then wrapping up and sweating it out. The mint tea is also diaphoretic. It will raise the body temperature so that we can sweat out toxins. Okay, and so that's really important when we're fighting a virus. We want to support that action. Elderberry also reduces mucus production. So if you're feeling like you just have so much congestion going on, this is a great one to reduce the production of it, but also thin the mucus, the quality of the mucus, so that we can expel that from the body. Also really great at relieving body aches. So, you know, when you get the flu and you just feel like down to your bones, it hurts. Elderberry is really helpful for that. Now, elderberry by itself, you have to take it very often. So if you're taking elderberry capsules or a syrup and you're taking it twice a day, not enough, not enough. Elderberry only has a half-life in the body of about an hour and a half. So if you're going to take this by itself, a pure elderberry syrup, and you are not feeling well, you want to take your elderberry syrup every hour to hour and a half for at least that first 24 hours. Okay, so takes a little bit of work. Herbs do, but super effective. And elderberry usually tastes good, so most people don't complain about taking elderberry. Thyme. Now, this is something everybody, or I should say most people, would have in their kitchen cabinet, right? In your spice cabinet, most people would have thyme. Very antimicrobial, which is why it's a culinary herb. When we look at our culinary herbs, they're super antimicrobial. And that's, you know, because we would put them in foods, and that was their purpose, was to protect our digestive systems and our immune systems from whatever could be in the meat or whatever we were eating, right? It's also a great expectorant and a great antitussive. You can use thyme fresh from your garden or pull it out of your spice cabinet. I gave you 2 ways that you can use thyme. First is as a tea. And so you can do a teaspoon of fresh thyme or your thyme from your cabinet in a cup of boiled water, cover it and let it steep for about 7 minutes. Now we want to cover it because this is a very aromatic plant, right? Like a lot of aroma. Well, in that aroma are what we call volatile oils. That's the really strong medicine. We want to keep that in the tea. If we don't cover it, it's just going to evaporate out. Okay, so I'll do my tea and I'll put a plate on top. Now those volatile oils will cause condensation on the plate and drop back into solution in your cup. So when you're drinking that, you're getting that really good medicine. You can add honey to this or lemon, however you desire. And I would say drink 3 to 4 cups a day while you're not well. Okay. Now you can also, if you want to prepare this ahead of time to always have on hand, you can do a great honey infusion with thyme. And so you would take a jar of honey, warm it up, put fresh thyme in there or the thyme from your cabinet and stir it in, cover it, let it sit on your counter for 3 to 4 weeks. All that medicine from the thyme is infusing into that honey. When it's done, you're going to warm the honey and strain the thyme out. Now you have a honey you can take by the teaspoonful or mix into a cup of hot water or mix into any of your other favorite tea. And it's wonderful for coughs, colds, flu, or any kind of virus like that. Garlic, garlic, garlic. Everybody should eat their garlic. This is the best antimicrobial herb that we have. It's very warming to the body. It is a circulatory herb, so it moves blood through the body, has amazing action against almost every bacteria and virus. I say everyone should eat at least 1 to 2 cloves of garlic a day. If it's during cold or flu, then you should be eating 3 to 5 cloves of garlic a day. Now, they say fresh garlic is best. And if you cook it, it's still about 80% effective. I was a straight B student, so I don't care. I'll cook my garlic. I just put it in everything, right? 80% is good to me. So I don't care how you get your garlic in, just get it in. Really, really good. I would not take fresh garlic by itself without food though, because it can be really irritating to the stomach. So if you're going to do fresh garlic, like just chopped up and taken on a spoon, make sure that you take that with food. This is one of my favorite remedies that I always make right before cold season hits, and I keep it in my fridge. Honey, lemon, and ginger syrup. Super easy to make, super delicious. Lots of different ways you can use it. So I have the recipe here. It's 1 lemon sliced, keeping the rind on. Make sure you wash that first. 1 2-inch piece of fresh ginger root peeled and sliced, and some good organic honey. And you put that all together in a jar and you cover that and let that sit in your refrigerator for a couple of weeks. Then you're going to pull the ginger and the lemon out. It's going to be very syrupy, runny, right? And just leave that in your fridge. And as you need it, you can just use it by the teaspoonful. You can take it straight. You can put it in a cup of hot water. You can add it to tea. You can make a hot toddy with a little bit of whiskey. Honey, lemon, and whiskey is sometimes the best thing for a spastic cough. Okay. There have been times where I have tried every herb I know and cannot calm a cough. 1 shot of whiskey, done. So whiskey is medicinal. Okay. All right. And then other herbs from your kitchen, add these into your food all the time. These are a lot of really warming antimicrobial herbs. So we have oregano and rosemary, turmeric, onions, horseradish, cayenne pepper, jalapeno pepper, any of those things that are going to warm the body and stimulate the immune system. Get them into every single meal that you can get it in. And you can get extracts or capsules of these as well if you wanted to, beef it up a little bit. But I think the best way to get your medicine is in food. The body uses it really well that way. So when you improve your diet, the nutrition, the food that you're giving your body, and you're adding these things, then your body uses it the best. All right, important to know, herbs, dietary supplements, and pharmaceutical medications can have interactions. So just because you're using something that is all natural does not mean that there is no risk, okay, especially if you take pharmaceutical medications. So it's really important to seek guidance from a qualified herbal practitioner and or your physician who can determine safe choices for you and dosing based on your medical history, okay? Herbs taken in food form typically do not pose any risk like supplementing with herbs can, okay? So again, food as medicine is always best, and then seek more targeted herbal therapy when needed under the guidance of an herbal practitioner. Always seek the guidance of your healthcare professional again before beginning any new dietary supplements or herbs and when taking pharmaceutical medications, and never stop your prescribed medications without consulting your physician. Okay, so I've given a couple of resources here for some of the supplements and the herbs. So the first is my full script dispensary. You can access that through the shop page of Herbal Wisdom Institute, and you'll get access to any of the dietary supplements that I talked about, hundreds of brands, and herbal extracts there as well. You can also go to wisewomanherbals.com. Disclaimer, I do work for them, but I don't get anything from any sales. So yeah, but I wanted you to have those there because those are two really good resources for all the things that we talked about today. If you're wanting to learn more, Herbal Wisdom Institute has a variety of classes that you can access. If you're really new to the concept of herbal medicine or natural medicine, then I suggest you start with our Herbal Medicine Basics 6-video course. I go through a variety of body systems and the most common conditions we all experience at home, and some simple herbal remedies that you can start doing on your own at home. There's also herbal flavors and energetics. So I've mentioned how a cold virus acts cold in the body. So we want to give it warming foods. That's an energetic, okay? Flavors and energetics. And so that's a really simple lesson to start with. And then we also have foundations in Western herbalism. This is for you if you want to become an herbalist, a certified herbalist. Maybe you want to be a practitioner, or maybe you want to start making herbal medicine. This is the course for you. So it is an online course, but it's instructor led. It's a blend of recorded lessons as well as live lessons. The next course begins, it's actually October 6th. I apologize, that's a typo. Next course begins October 6th. It's runs for about 6 months. And there's an enrollment discount through September 15th. So if this is something you're interested in, you can register right on the website, use the discount code TEACHME, and it will give you $150 off that course. If you have any questions, want to learn more about that course, you can email me through the website. That will come directly to me. Ask whatever questions that you have, and I'm happy to help, okay? And so you can find a variety of other courses also at herbalwisdominstitute.com. There's some resources here as well that you'll get in your recording. So did I make it on time? I made it on time. 5 minutes over, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to check the chat. Let's see if there's any questions there. I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a second. Okay, so I'm going to check the chat. Wondering what your thoughts are on elderberry / elderflower and also colloidal silver. So I love the combination of elderberry and elderflower together. Elderberry tends to be, while it can be a little bit drying, it is slightly moistening. Elderflower is very drying, okay? So when we put the two together, we get some balance. Now, if you take elderflower by itself for, say, sinus congestion, it can make you too dry. And then you're going to get a terrible sinus headache, right? So I'm all about balance. That herbal flavors and energetics class talks a lot about balance. But I do love the combination of the berry and the flower together. I think when we're using a whole plant preparation like that, we get a synergy that we don't get from an individual part on its own. Okay, so I'm a big fan of that. Colloidal silver, I'll be honest, I don't use it. I don't have enough experience with that to be able to give my opinion on colloidal silver. So I apologize. That's not a question I can answer. Okay, next one. If you're prone to oxalate kidney stones, they limit you to 500 to 600 IUs of vitamin D. Any thoughts? I've not heard that, to be honest. I'm gonna have to look that up. I did not know that that was a limitation. So Diana, I'll do some research and I'll reach out to you by email if I find anything different on that. Okay. But I would say if you're prone to that, definitely talk to your doctor and follow the advice that your doctor gives you. Okay. Let's see. What about the use of essential oils versus supplements versus natural foods? So I think that they all have their place. I love essential oils diffused whenever you have a respiratory condition going on. I think that there are some great antimicrobial essential oils, and essential oils that also help to open up the airways so that we get more breath. With any kind of respiratory issue, my favorites are, and I blend these together, would be eucalyptus, tea tree, rosemary, oregano, and usually a lavender. That's the blend I like to do. And what I also will do is I'll run that in each room of my house for 20 minutes at a time, because it's also very disinfectant to the air and the surfaces. So while it's helping you breathe, it's also disinfecting your rooms. So if someone in my house is sick, I'll move that diffuser every 20 minutes to a different room. I'm not one that uses essential oils internally. I don't ingest essential oils. But I also, that's not my area of expertise. So beyond telling you what to diffuse for respiratory, not my area, but I do have an instructor who's putting together a really incredible essential oils course that's going to be launching in the beginning of 2022. So if you want to learn more about essential oils, make sure that you're on my newsletter list or following the Facebook page, because once that is ready, that will be put up and sent out by email, but put on the Facebook page as well. Okay, let's see. What herb might be a natural appetite suppressant? Oh, honey, if I knew that, I wouldn't be overweight, right? I'd be a millionaire if I could tell you that. I don't know that there are really ones that are actual suppressants. We do have herbs that stimulate appetite, and we do have herbs that change how our body manages blood sugar, but not necessarily decreasing appetite. Suggestions on how to restore your taste and smell after recovering from COVID. So that the information tends to point all to zinc. So losing taste and smell tends to be from zinc deficiency, which a lot of us are zinc deficient. So amping up your zinc intake during that time will help get that back faster. It's not going to be an immediate thing, but it can come back faster if you're taking the right amount of zinc. Thieves recipe for essential oils is good. Yes, that's a really, really good one. You can diffuse that. Is very disinfectant to surfaces as well, if anyone knows about the thieves oil. Let's see, smelling dill can curb sugar cravings. Oh, that's interesting. Or a dill essential oil. I did not know that. But you know what? Like, is that the same as like if I'm really hungry, but I don't really want to eat, I go eat a pickle? Interesting. Thank you for that, Meg. That's really cool. And then Kayla says dill would make her hungry. Fennel can curb sugar cravings. Yep, it can. That's great. So good questions there. If there's any other questions and you want to unmute, You're welcome to do that now and just ask away. And I'm here until there's no more questions. Let me see if I have to make you unmute. Let's see. Okay. All right. Well, if there's no questions, that's great. Okay. So I thank you so much for taking your time tonight to come on here. And I hope that you learned at least one thing that was really useful for you and that you feel like you can do at home in terms of maybe it's making the honey, lemon, and ginger syrup or making a thyme tea, or that you really just understand something better than you did before. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for putting some trust in me to give you some good information. And I hope to see you all in another class at another time. So I will send this recording out to you as soon as it finishes processing. And I hope that you all have a really beautiful evening and you stay well and healthy. Bye, everyone.